Business ownership has never been hotter, but how do you do it? That's where I come in. Allow me to guide you on your journey. Welcome to Ion Franchise. This episode sponsored by SEO Samba. Empower your franchise with predictable results and AI-driven marketing. Up next.
But the boss, of course, is, let's never forget, is the customer. You know, that is kind of an interesting situation. I've been in this business all my life. So it's very hard later to say, I didn't get the burger right, when you're the one making it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another fabulous episode of Ion Franchising, and I'm your host, Lance Graulich. I have my friend Chris Tripoli here, and Chris is a restaurant expert. He's been a restaurateur. He's a restaurant advisor today. He's a restaurant coach, and he is going to talk all about how you get into a restaurant. And if you have an independent restaurant, maybe you want to set it up for franchising. Chris and I will help you with that as well. But I want to welcome Chris to the show. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Lance. Glad to be here.
Well, thank you very much. And Chris and I were just talking before I hit record. Don't ever forget who the boss is. And there's no more true mantra to that than the restaurant business. It is the hallmark of a successful restaurant. And Chris, who is the boss we're talking about?
That's a great point, because there's a lot of confusion. Sometimes when you're the owner, you think that, well, obviously I'm the ultimate boss. If you're the franchisor, if you're, franchisee, one of the reasons why you got into franchising was, you may have been attracted to a brand, but you really want to set up your own shop and run your own company. So all of these things are sort of steps, and you might be in charge. You might have the ultimate responsibility. You might be held accountable for decisions. But the boss, of course, is, let's never forget, is the customer. The person that sometimes we overlook. The customer isn't always right, as you know. But that's never the point. The customer's always the customer, and we need them to be loyal to us. We need them to come back more often. We need them to bring more people with them. So if we're planning on raising revenue, the best thing we can do is stay close to the boss, and that is watch what your customer does. When we forget that, when we start thinking about other things that may not have a direct impact or a direct positive impact on the customer, sometimes is when we lose our way.
Yeah, I think it was Steve Jobs that always said that when you focus on product and you focus on the service and the brand, the profits will follow. And that really is how it is in the restaurant business. There are some nuances to it, because when I joined Wingstop as a franchisee, costs were high. Chicken wing prices were like frog's legs. You hope that a chicken had more than 2 wings, but that wasn't the case. And we really did have to evolve the menu to other products to make a reasonable profit, or at least make sure we're profitable. But for the most part, a typical restaurant really needs to keep their eye on the prize, that boss, as you said. So Chris, let's dive into, we'll talk about your experience in a little bit, but
okay.
If you're a restaurant in America today, there are some significant challenges, or there at least were, with supply chain during COVID. And now we're seeing all kinds of inflation that we haven't necessarily seen before. And logically, restaurants can pass on some of those costs to customers. But if you get too expensive, customers start to cook at home or drink their coffee at home. So what are some of the creative ways that restaurateurs can continue to appeal to more and more customers these days with inflation or other issues?
Well, the two things that we see that seem to be working best, and we're seeing this across the board. So whether you're a restaurant operator with a limited service, counter service, drive-through kind of situation, or you're full service with private rooms and a bar, we're seeing that most success right now is coming by being more directly pinpointed towards your offerings. So everyone is realizing that, the closer I stay to my customer habits, the closer I understand my item sales mix, the more I play to my strengths, eliminate my weaknesses, I might have a slightly smaller menu. It's
Yeah.
easier to purchase, easier to prep, there's less waste, and I'm increasing my profitability. So pinpointing what's working and discarding what isn't seems to be step number one. And then step number two is realizing that convenience is something that has got to be a part of everybody's game plan. We came out of
Yes.
COVID wanting convenience. We want it now. And that means it doesn't just mean getting a pizza delivered now. It means double pork chop dinners. It means packaged family meals. I've got clients that are doing meals with liquor where it's permissible. Bottles of champagne with seafood dinner for two on Friday, available for call in, order ahead, delivery, car side pickup. So these are the kinds of things that we're finding are ways of, maintaining your customers' redemption, loyalty, and raising the revenue in tough times.
So, Chris, thank you for that. What are some of the most common issues or concerns that your clients come to you with? Is it, hey, Chris, my costs are too high, I need more profit? Or is it, my sales suck and I thought I'd be at, 2 million in revenue at this point and I'm barely cracking a million? I mean, what are you seeing?
Well, actually, a little of both. And what we always try to tell people is that what you're telling us when you say things like, I used to be busier, I need to be busier. Can you see what I'm missing? Or I am busy, but I'm running amok. I'm having a hard time holding on to people. Labor's crazy, product costs are nuts, profit margins got cut in half. So I'd like to be making more money. First thing we like to tell them is that you're telling us the result of an issue. Numbers are always the result. They're not the issue. They're the result of something. So let's take a look at what's getting us there. What are we doing wrong with our guest experience that is not holding on to our guest count or not able to attract current guests that say are maybe eating other places? Or what are we doing wrong in our operations where we're getting the revenue that we want, but we're messy, with labor, cost of goods, and we're not managing our numbers correctly. So let's audit how we're doing what we're doing, and then let's go ahead and fix those issues. It's always in one of the three P's, Lance. We're always going to find these issues in people. We're either handling people wrong, not hiring correctly, training poorly, not training at all. We're having a people issue, wrong people in the wrong place, or it's product. Like I mentioned on the onset, maybe we're not really adjusting our menu. Maybe we don't really know our item cost and we're not seasonally playing to our strengths.
Yeah.
Or it's processes and procedures. We don't have the systems in place to maintain consistency. And thereby we've got, our costs falling through the cracks because we remind everyone, you got into this business by investing a lot of dollars. This is a business where you put a lot of dollars to get a lot of dimes. So
Mhm.
we're chasing 10 cents on the dollar. And
Yeah.
if you're having a revenue issue or a profit issue, you got to take a look at the reasons why that happened.
Yeah.
Fix those reasons, get a better result.
Yeah, good stuff. I have people that call me all the time and say, I'm an independent restaurant owner. I have a great concept. I think I'm ready to franchise. And my team sets up people to franchise all the time. To be
Mhm.
honest, I don't think I've set up a restaurant this year at all. It's been home service brands, an addiction recovery center,
Mm.
quite a few other industries or categories, and no restaurants this year. But restaurants are still looked at as like the sexiest category to get into. I want to
Sure.
own a Dunkin' Donuts. I want to own a, fancy restaurant or whatever it might be. I want a Texas Roadhouse. So what do you say? Why are restaurants so sexy?
That is kind of an interesting situation. I've been in this business all my life. I mean, from working, managing, I've had the opportunity to own my own restaurants. And then for the last 26, say 30 years, I've either been doing development work, consulting, or advising others in the business. And I'm always, always amazed by the amount of successful people, smart, successful people in other businesses that can't wait to either retire or sell so that they can quickly open up a restaurant. I'm thinking, wow.
Crazy, right?
Yeah, it is kind of crazy. But that's what they'll say. No, are you kidding? I go out all the time. It looks like fun. This is a fun way to earn a living. You know, I've made a bunch of money selling, I don't know, whatever, oil pipeline equipment. I sit in an office. It's horrible. I go out to dinner. I'm thinking, look at this. The chef is walking the floor, you know, shaking hands, kissing babies. Look at the managers over there suggesting wine. These guys are having a ball. And so that's why I want to get into the business. And we have to quickly explain to them, you know, that this is a lot of work, and it's good that you're attracted to it. This is a passion-based business. So it is good that you are attracted out of passion, that you think it's, you know, sexy and interesting. And so, because some of the most successful operators are the people that lead with their emotion, but then they back it up with their systems, procedures, so that they can maintain profitability. And so that's what we like to tell them. And then they're going to have to bring a group in to teach them what it is they don't know, so that their passion can then turn into a business. The business can operate consistently. And if that business is something that they want to grow, then it can become a brand.
Absolutely. So share with us a little bit about your background. Give us the highlights of what you've experienced in the restaurant business in your lifetime.
Well, I'm just a lifer. You know, I started as a 15-year-old kid and I've never left. I was raised in Phoenix, Arizona, loved it. My first job, I just had a tremendous positive influence from the manager there. And I think a lot of people, you know, in the restaurant business would probably say that. I was mentored early on by a wonderful manager who just saw that I was a young kid who was interested. So he seized that and said, why don't you just come into work every day after school? And I did. And I would sit in the office and I learned how the in-house accountant was handling reservations, and he would have me check in deliveries. I was a busboy. I was a pantry guy. I learned to line cook. Then before you know it, I was doing banquet waiter work, you know, as a high school kid. Now, this was a very high-end steakhouse. And in the late 60s, early 70s, you know, things were a little more formal. I mean, so I'm out on the floor with my red bust coat and a cummerbund and, you know, and bow ties and tablecloths and candles.
I bet you had a crummer too.
Oh, yes. And so I just loved it. I connected, and because I had some really good examples set for me, I wanted to learn more. I got into management and moved to Houston, Texas when I was very young, because a gentleman that I met in Phoenix wanted to start a barbecue hamburger chain. He was an excellent financial mind, but he needed young, hardworking talent. I got on the ground floor of that. The concept was called Luther's Barbecue. The time was the 70s, early 80s. I learned at a very young age the opening process, the do's and don'ts, the budgeting, the timeline, because we went from 1 to 7 units very quickly.
Yeah.
And the only reason I left was that I had, along the way, created my own idea. And I found a couple of people that liked it and were willing to finance me. So as a very young man, I was able to get financing, and I opened up my first restaurant company. I opened my first restaurant at 28, and we made it a 3-unit small statewide chain, casual swinging door saloon, a lot of fun, you know, chili burgers and beer kind of a thing. So
Nice.
that began my restaurant ownership. I was a hands-on independent restaurant operator for a while, and I did that, and we sold that. I did another restaurant before I started doing restaurant development work, restaurant expansion work on a consulting basis for others. And that started in the mid-90s. I did that for 26 years before selling
Wow.
my restaurant consulting company to a lady who had been working with me for 9 years, and she bought it and she's still operating. Now I'm real proud of her.
I love it. That's
So
fabulous.
that's what kind of got me from the worker to the manager, from the owner to the developer.
So who is your ideal client today? Is it the independent business that might want a franchise and needs help with systems, needs advice on how their menu's set up? Give us the highlights of who that client is for you.
Yes, yes. Typically, the ideal client is someone who's already in the business and they are thinking about or just beginning to grow. So most of the people that we're working with at the restaurant clinic are people who are maybe 2, 3, 4 units. So the good news is they're in the business, but they're just now thinking about how to sharpen up, how to grow, how to go from a business to a brand, how to create more value. And so a lot of times that starts with evaluating the team. It all starts with people. So we find ourselves getting into an awful lot of leadership development work, owner coaching work, to get the table set for expansion. Sometimes the expansion is franchising, and sometimes it isn't. Sometimes people want to become a multi-concept management group. So they want to create different concepts that they can operate. And
Yep.
that's very interesting, but also has its own uniquenesses and challenges.
Yep.
Sometimes people want to grow their initial concept and they want to do it through as a company. So they're not going to franchise, they're going to do company growth. And we're able to assist them regardless of avenue that they choose.
So tell us, Chris, how does an independent operator know that franchising could be an option for them? How do they know they're ready?
I'll tell you what, here's when you don't know. When a customer from 8 states away calls you and says, God, I was visiting whatever, Dallas. Love your place. Love, love, love. There's nothing like it here in Toledo. You got to sell me a franchise. I've got some money and I know it would work well here.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not when you're ready.
Yeah.
You don't want to do franchising by responding to interest. You
Yeah,
want to,
you bring up a great point. There are so many brands that start that way because the owner might not be aware that franchising could be for them. So they hear that there's interest from people and hear why there's interest. There's nothing like this over here.
right,
So while that is part of the due diligence that you as an owner should do, that is certainly not everything.
right.
Um,
And that
I
comes
just got
later.
off. Yes, I got off the call with a great group in South Florida that have an amazing concept. And one of the questions I asked, and they were prepared with the answer, you're based in Florida. What are your growth plans? Because when a brand has a certain amount of proprietary materials, whether it's logoed cups or a specific chicken breast they use, or whatever it is that is proprietary to them, all distributors need to carry it. Otherwise, if you expand 3 states away, how does that one restaurant get all that product without really having a severe impact on their food cost for
Yeah,
shipping and things like that? So there's a lot of things to think of, obviously.
yeah.
And hopefully it's more than that one individual that thinks it's a unique, great idea, right?
Right. And see, and again, then that a lot of them have come that way where they said, look, I've been operating for 4 years, and the good news is we're busy. Customer count is increasing. I think our numbers look good. And I constantly get these phone calls from all around the nation. So I've just started saying yes. How can you help me sell franchises to these guys? And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Before we start bouncing to Michigan and Ohio and from Seattle, just because you're getting phone calls, you want to play to your strength. That's rule number one.
Yes.
So if you want to grow through franchising, let's understand and document why is it? What's our point of difference? What's working?
Yeah.
What are we representing in our particular niche?
Yeah.
Sandwich, burrito, Asian market, Mexican. What is it we're doing with our pizza concept, whatever, that is our point of difference? Okay.
Yeah.
That's
And Chris, let's talk about that because you hit on something incredibly important. I see a lot of brands, I can't believe how many new pizza franchises I saw just last year alone. And what do you say when you see now a pivotal moment in pizza happened several years ago when brands like Blaze and Pyology,
right.
these what do you want to call it? The buffet concept of
Right.
ingredients. Throw whatever you want on a pizza. It's the same price, generally speaking, and we're going to
Hmm.
have it done for you quickly.
Right.
And that whole new genre of pizza popped up. You
Right.
couldn't beat that New York pizza that I grew up with, or Brooklyn pizza, whatever it might be. But if you're from Chicago, you're going to complain, and if you're from Detroit, you want that Detroit pizza. Everybody's got a different style, and you can say the same thing for sandwiches. But
Sure.
how do you advise somebody that has a pizza concept as to what they should or should not do to make sure they keep those points of differentiation.
Well, yeah, you brought it up. That's what we show them. We say we first need to analyze why whatever it is that's working is working. If you've got really good, smooth, fast moving line, you're known for really wild variety, build your own crust. What is it that we're really known for? Sometimes it's an operational item. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's like the pizza might be the same sizes, but our point of difference is that we're really small and we require very little labor. We run great numbers, so we can fit into things like office tunnels, parks, containers, airport kiosks. Okay, maybe we grow that route because that's your uniqueness. But we've got to find the uniqueness. And sometimes it's in the product. Sometimes it's in the concept or the process. And then that's what we're going to promote because it is crowded. You mentioned some great examples of how people really reacted well to a customer established practice. The idea of going down the line, visually seeing food and building something. We loved it with sandwiches. I mean, we saw it with Subway and Quiznos and others for years and years. We loved it with burritos. Go down the line, Chipotle, colorful, pick this, pick that. I love it. I was fortunate enough to work with Freebirds, and we
Yeah.
loved the way that line worked because of the color and the portion and the engagement. People could go through and pick what they wanted. And so
And by the way,
turning that into
Chris,
pizza was a great item.
and for old dogs in restaurants like you and I and everybody else listening that has any kind of restaurant experience, there's nothing worse than having tickets hanging in a kitchen and trying to read all the special instructions and get everything 100% correct
Right.
every time. If you're in a Chipotle or a Subway, it's kind of difficult to screw that up when the customer's pointing and looking and telling you what to do. So it's hard for a customer from Chipotle to get home and say, you screwed up my order,
Right.
or I didn't get what I wanted. I wanted extra sour cream. You didn't put it on. Now,
Right.
of course, we get our Chipotle, my wife and I, when we get Chipotle, we're ordering online and we're not seeing it prepared.
Right.
But the idea is it is a very visual
Customizing.
thing.
Right. And you're right. I was introduced to this by a brilliant concept genius in the restaurant industry, Phil Romano, when he created
Oh
Fuddruckers
yeah,
way back in the 80s. And I
absolutely.
remember him saying, of course it's going to be the best burger. It's the best burger. Why? You made it. You're going to make it just the way you want it. Here's the bun, here's the beef. Now go to the burger bar. So if you want a little melted cheese, if you want ketchup on just one side, you want 2 scoops of pico, you don't want any pico. I like lettuce, I like onion. You're building it yourself. And it was a fun engagement way. So it's very hard later to say, I didn't get the burger right when you were the one making it. So
True story. Give us some additional, give me some red flags. Like when you walk into a restaurant, what are some of the things that you see and you go, oh boy, these guys are struggling?
okay, yeah, that's a very good question. A lot of times you'll just get the sense from the overall guest experience. People need to realize that we're more than product, and we're more than service. The idea of the QSC, quality, service, and cleanliness that we were taught maybe years and years ago as
Yeah.
the formula for profitability, well, it isn't. It's the process just to get you into the game, man. That's the price of admission. So when
Yeah.
you walk in and if you don't have that feeling of being welcome, there's no belonging. There's not the quick greeting. If the counter service isn't really well prepared, sometimes the background music isn't on. Sometimes light bulbs are out.
Yes.
You get a sense of non-caring, and this is before you ordered. Sometimes the
Yeah.
order isn't right. Sometimes the product doesn't taste good. But before you even get there, operators who are listening need to realize that we're sending signals. So when someone parks in the parking lot, their first impression of the appearance, trash and debris on the walkway, a friendly somebody to say hello when I get in, no fingerprints on the door when I get in. These are the kinds of things that show that you're ready for me.
Yeah.
And there's care. So that's the initial red flag. The other ones, of course, are a little bit more obvious. If we're finding menus that aren't well thought out, portions that are inconsistent, around the table. Obviously, if the quality is poor, if the servers, whether they're counter servers or table servers, can't correctly answer your question. Total turnoff. If they can't describe the dish, if they can't tell you why they're suggesting that you save room for dessert, if they don't have a favorite of the non-alcoholic lemonade specials or whatever the heck it is, if they don't know that, bingo, big red flag. And guess what? It's probably not their fault. It's
Yeah.
probably the manager who's not managing, or it's probably the owner who's not directing.
Absolutely. It's typically a leadership issue. And sometimes that leadership issue is from high up. Somebody's calling in the signals like a football game, if you will. It could be the franchisor, it could be whoever.
That's
But
exactly right.
but the flip side of the question I asked about red flags is relating to, let's say, Chick-fil-A or In-N-Out Burger that is not a franchise. But one of the things I noticed about In-N-Out Burger, before you ever notice that the building might get a little rough or needs to be painted, they paint it.
They're on it.
They're on it. They are painting the building before it even needs to be painted. The employees are wearing the crisp, clean uniforms and always have a smile on their face. So, these are things that so many people that get into the food business that don't have the experience have not lived and died by, and tend to forget. So let me, when it comes to franchisors, what should new restaurant franchisors look for in franchisees so they can achieve these goals of having these standards met, so a lot of the crap that we just discussed doesn't happen in their restaurants? Obviously, number one, they have to set the bar.
That's a great question. I think the franchisors need to be mindful that when they're selecting, a franchisee, they really need to be looking more for characteristic than capability. You're selecting someone that's almost like a family member sitting around the table. My experience has shown that the wrong franchisee is the person that leads with, I love your concept, and I've always wanted to be in business for myself. I've wanted to go and run my own company, and I'm using basically you, the potential franchisor, as a way of helping me get there. Okay, some of that sounds good because technically franchisees are their own company. But from a characteristic point of view, the right franchisee is a soldier, not the general. Because a franchisee who really is led to franchising as a shortcut to their own business might be the one that has the characteristic of questioning, adding, going through the training, but that's the one that's going to say, why do you really need to do this way? I've already learned it in 3 steps and you've got it written in 5. I don't understand why the menu is say reviewed twice a year. If it's working, it's working. Or, I'm in an area that's a little different and I think I could do this. Bingo, you've been there. And I thought, uh-oh, if you really and truly want to open your own business and that business is going to be a restaurant, I say, God bless you, go do it. And there's tremendous help. We've helped many. I think I've been a part of well over 100 brand new startup concepts. But if you really want to bond, with a program, then you want to be a franchisee. If you respect that program, join the Franchise Advisory Council. Give them your marketing ideas or your ideas on product, but be part of the system. Don't become a franchisee and then fight the system because you like your own ideas better.
100%. I was president of the Franchise Advisory Council for Wingstop in the very early days when Wingstop, as I mentioned earlier, there were challenges with food costs, and they were exacerbated as food costs or chicken prices kept going up. So we knew we needed something else on the menu besides chicken wings, and it wasn't going to be hamburgers. It was still going to be chicken,
Yes.
and it ended up being, chicken tenders, and we added other side items and what have you. And it helped. It helped and it fit the core because you don't want people to question why you have certain menu items.
Right.
Wings will still be the most popular. At an average Buffalo Wild Wings, a wing stop would sell more wings than a Buffalo Wild Wings because they
Wow.
had this gigantic menu and
Right.
beer and all these other things, but we
Hmm.
would sell more chicken wings than Buffalo Wild Wings because for a while that's all we had. So give me some misconceptions. Call it the top three misconceptions about growing a restaurant franchise.
Okay. Well, I think the first one is that it's easy. I'm going to grow through franchising because what an easy way to get locations out there. I'm going to grow by using obviously other operators who are going to find the location. They're going to do the work. They've got to guarantee the lease. They've got to raise the money. See how easy this is for me?
Yeah.
Those things that I just said are true. Those are separate companies. And yes, they will be needing to raise their own funds and find their location, hire their own staff, and run their own business. That's very true. But franchising is not, easy because you are committed to promoting, educating, supervising, supporting in order to create value in your brand. If you're not doing that, if you're not selecting correctly, if you're not supervising, training, and then doing the ongoing supporting, you're going to find this as a exercise that is extremely difficult because you'll have people out there and you're going to have operational issues and you're going to have franchisees, wanting to walk and it's going to get ugly. So that's
Yeah.
number one. Number two, I think I would go back to the top of our conversation, and that is never lose focus. Just because you're franchising, never lose focus on who the real boss is. You
Got
want
it.
to make sure that the decisions you're making are to your customer profile. So first off, do you really know your customer profile? Who's the demographic? Who's the repeat customer? Make sure that you're going to markets, where that customer is going to be met. Make sure that the
Yes.
marketing that you're going to want to develop is going to meet that targeted customer. Never
Yes.
forget who the real boss is. And then I guess the third one is grow in order to build saturation. There's that old adage that we hear time and time again, growth creates a formula that goes, it's a mathematic formula that if it works, it's 1 + 1 = 3. If you're adding more units and you're doing it correctly, you're not only adding revenue, you're not only adding profit, or in this case, royalty income, but you're creating also additional value in that brand. So you do that by saturating the market that's working. You don't do that by saying this works in Florida, so we went to Toledo, Ohio. It works in Florida. Let's saturate Florida. Let's wrap around the Gulf Coast. Let's
Yes.
go up the East Coast. Let's work where we know our supply works, where our marketing dollar is going to get the best bang for the dollar. Saturate your market. Don't shotgun your market.
I love it. I know of a franchisee at Wingstop when wing prices got really high, some franchisees were raising prices.
Mm.
And I warned a couple of them. I said, be very careful. You should do very small increases. Even brands like In-N-Out Burger do one price increase a year, sometimes
Yeah.
two. I remember in the old days, Cheesecake Factory would do a 1.7% price increase or so in the fall and about the same in the spring. So 3.5%, nobody would ever notice on menu items that were $18 or $16 a salad times
Yes.
3%. Nobody would even notice. But this gentleman said it did this huge price increase. And what he said to me was, well, so far nobody's noticed. And I said, BS, nobody noticed. And I had to lecture him. And I said, listen, there's a percentage of your customers that will notice and not care and keep coming like it's no big deal because they have no other place to go for this quality of food with homemade ranch, blue cheese, fresh cooked to order wings, etc., homemade fries. There's another percentage of the customers that won't necessarily even notice.
Mhm.
Again, no big deal. But then there's other people that are going to notice and they're going to make a decision as to whether they're going to even continue as your customer.
Sure.
Maybe instead of coming 4 times a month or 6 times a month, they're going to cut down to twice a month.
Right.
but you come talk to me in 120 days. And he goes, 120 days. So
Yeah,
that's when you're going to see the full impact of that price increase. At
yeah.
90 days, it was like his hair was on fire and he started seeing a negative result and moved prices back a little bit in the favor of the boss.
Mm-hmm.
So it's amazing when you get disconnected from the boss, as you say, how
Yeah.
screwed up things will get.
Well, it's
Tell
a
us about
dual-edged.
your,
I'm
yeah, go
sorry.
ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say it's a dual-edged sword, this whole thing on pricing. It's too many times we get a little revenue bump. So people are saying, look at same store sales are up, but we're not totally looking at the real picture. We might get a little increase in revenue, but are we really increasing our guest count? That's the
Yes.
win. Because if the price increase gives me that little bit of bump and it helps with increased cost, but I'm losing guest count, then that speaks to your point. I might have a big problem in 90, 120 and on.
I love that you said that. Guest count is really an important factor that people lose sight of.
Right,
Ultimately, sales are incredibly important, but if you're not growing your customer count and
right.
gaining customers, you have a problem, especially if you're in an area where your customers are older. As they start dying, if you're not growing, there was an old stat that you and I remember that there's a percentage of your customers over time that actually die. And if you don't replace them, you have a problem. Your business will die as well. Tell us about your international experience.
I think looking back, that was some of my most fun. The idea of being able to go to other countries, I've been very fortunate to work in, Mexico, Central America, South America, the Caribbean, Canada, Middle East. Craziest project I ever did was in Lagos, Nigeria. We did a complete concept development and everything. We did it all
Wow.
from the States, all of it. It took about 2 years. Everything was developed, designed, and shipped in containers, 23 days on the water, and they received it and they opened up their fast food concept. So that was very, very
Wow.
challenging because of the uniqueness. We met in London where we would lease out a small catering kitchen to do the menu development. They would send us 12 what we called the Nigerian tasters to make sure we were getting the chicken and the sides and everything just right. So, I was very blessed to do a lot of work in different countries. And what I noticed was that some of the established American brands, things that everybody knows, whether it's a Brinker brand or Blooming Brands or Cheesecake Factory or Shake Shack, some of these American brands have some of their highest revenue units coming from countries that are outside the United States. Working in the Middle East, for example, I saw Chili's and I saw, I think it was Ruby Tuesdays and Applebee's and whatnot. These things are incredibly stupidly busy. Lines at the door when you're there at the opening bell. So what I liked about it was our role, of course, was to work with people who were there. So
Yeah.
these were business leaders there who wanted to expand their restaurant brand. They wanted the American know-how, so to speak, the ingenuity on purveyor selection, staff training, leadership, coaching, site finding, menu creativity, design, et cetera. So, wow, we had a lot of work to do, but a lot of great memories working with people throughout the Middle East and in other countries.
Yeah, that's awesome. Talk a little bit about structuring your exit as an independent owner, as an
Mhm.
independent restaurant owner. What are the possibilities today for how you could structure that exit? Obviously, you could sell your independent restaurant. You might sell it to a group that wants to turn it into a franchise. So give us some other alternatives.
Yeah. Yeah, that is possible. Selling your concept to somebody who does want it because of the growth factor that they're going to do, or the next steps that they're going to do to it that you didn't take. Sometimes people are doing what we call inside deals, where they're selling it to key people that are either workers, investors. Sometimes it's a group, steady customers, and a couple of key managers go together and take you out, where you get some money now, but then you get some money ongoing, which really might be a nice way for you to have a little side income in your retirement years. Obviously, what you want to avoid is running your concept too far, running it to death, or you say, I want to retire now. I've got this concept. It's debt free. I've been operating it for 37 years. But on paper, the last 5 years have been nosediving. You've been losing your value.
Yeah.
Just because you're debt free doesn't mean there's a tremendous amount of advantage unless you've got good revenue and good operating numbers. So that's
Yeah.
one thing I always like to tell people is don't wait too long. No one wants to buy business on long ago history.
Yeah.
I met with somebody the other day and they said, maybe I should have retired 8 to 10 years ago because my numbers were better. But, I'm old enough now. I want to retire, so I want to sell. Yeah, but you hadn't been really reinvesting. The facility looks a little tired. Your volume is down. Your income is cut in half. And that's what someone's buying. They're going to buy
Yeah.
that today. They're not going to buy the fact that you lasted 30 or 40 years and you used to make a lot of money.
Yeah. All about your
Avoid it.
recent cash flow and your sales history and
Yeah.
systems in place.
And
But
of course, it does help if you've got assets. Sometimes if you own the land in the building, that
yeah.
helps. But most people in today might have a couple, 2, 3 restaurants, and they don't have those really good, valuable assets. They just
Yeah.
have the business and they need a multiple of earnings to go on out and find somebody to purchase.
Such a popular structure for an exit today is not a complete exit, but if you have a successful restaurant concept and you really don't want to be the franchisor, there are plenty of companies out there that want to take your idea
Mm-hmm.
and run it across the country via a franchise system.
Sure.
And typically you will keep your 1 or 2 corporate locations, continue to operate, but now you get a piece, sometimes 10% of the franchise company without investing any money. And you can make 2 million, $20 million on that deal.
Maybe.
Not a bad way to grow for something
No,
that you just created of 1 or 2 locations, perhaps,
not
right?
a not a bad deal at all. Not a bad, and I'm glad you brought that up. And that makes me think of another thing that we've been seeing. It's gotten very popular in the last decade or so, and that's the idea of taking the 1 or 2 units that you own and keeping that as a separate company, but then growing that concept into non-traditional locations. This might mean partnering with or licensing to a large company that's going to put your brand in arenas, downtown park locations, commercial establishments, airports. And so now you've got a separate company and they are well financed, well managed. You're getting a nice little piece, a little income, which is great for retirement.
Yeah.
And they're taking your brand and they're running with it.
So, that's another great example. You and I talked before I started recording here. We talked about how great brands lose their way. Starbucks, Baja Fresh, Carrabba's, TGI Fridays, to name a few. They were all at one time really great brands. And they either do through a change of leadership or terrible decision making, something happened to set them down the wrong path.
Yeah.
Share with us some examples of that.
Well, I think a smaller independent certainly can learn from larger, national brands. We certainly can. And that doesn't mean we're always learning what to do. Sometimes the best lessons are to learn what not to do. I think in the
Yes.
cases that you just mentioned, they were either guilty of getting stuck or they lost their focus. The latter, I think, seems to be the case in point because I was very, very encouraged by reading some of the initial posts coming out from the CEO change at Starbucks and how his initial points were let's get back to basics. Let's remember we are the cool king of the neighborhood coffee houses. Let's start thinking like that again. Let's make all the decisions having to do with neighborhood coffee house, best equipment, best service, best delivery, inventive drinks, support our baristas. And I thought, oh, that's wonderful. Because I think that maybe they were losing their way a little bit when they were marketing other things, food and drink at a discount, $6 this, and they were not focusing on what got them there. So I
Yeah.
think that's, we can learn from that. What sometimes big brands do is because they've been very successful and they've had national and in some cases international success, is they start resting. They don't keep questioning. They don't keep improving. And that means they They're accepting what I consider mediocrity.
Yeah.
And we teach the one thing in this business to fear is mediocrity. The last thing on earth you want is just enough success to say, hey, everybody's happy. Stockholders are happy. Managers are managing. Customers are smiling. I don't have to do anything. Bingo. That's the first step to the slide. So fear mediocrity, because some of the brands you mentioned, they didn't continue to focus on the customer. They didn't continue to improve. And then what happens is they either get bought or they change leadership and they want to focus on the bottom line rather than what drives the top line, which is the guest. And they might start making decisions that work for savings, but at the detriment of the brand, cutting back on quality or portion or something.
Yeah. And to add to that, you and I discussed that change. All of those brands have in common that they change things that affected the boss, the customer, and the customer did not like it. And the customers stopped coming.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they decreased frequency. Maybe they stopped coming altogether because they didn't like that decision. I told you about Baja Fresh changing the cup. They changed that souvenir dishwasher safe cup when Wendy's bought them. They also changed the chicken and they lost a ton of customers. Customers are always looking in a change of ownership for what is going to happen as a result of this new ownership or new management. It's the age-old trick, right, Chris? Hang up a banner that says under new management.
Right.
What does that mean? Is it going to change for the better or the worse?
And there is a way, to change for the better, to say, stay the course, to continue expansion. And there's nothing wrong with behind the scenes tightening and looking for ways of becoming more efficient, maybe rolling in better and more improved technology to improve efficiency. There's nothing wrong with that. We see when major companies do mergers or purchases of other brands, they can do it right. You don't have to immediately jump and start picking at things that are going to send a bad message, A, directly to the customer, but also B, what about that intangible message that you're sending to your management and key staff? That what's most important to new ownership right now is finding a cheaper product through different purveyors. What kind of message does that send to them?
Yes.
So, so there is the right avenue when you make a purchase and you need to find efficiencies. And there's the wrong avenue by jumping out there and making changes that negatively impact the guest and your staff. Let's remember that these big companies are not represented themselves to the customer.
Right.
They're represented through a chain of people. It's a people business. And
absolutely.
Happy staff typically equals happy guests. So the moment leadership gets a sense that, oh no, we've got to do this, or we've got to go from the fresh to the frozen, or we've got to go from the right size tomato to the smaller size, or we're buying cheaper ingredients, the buns won't rise as well. Oh no. See, the moment you send them those kinds of messages, the more they might lose interest, the more they lose their care, or the moment you just lose them.
Yeah. Good stuff. Chris, this has been amazing. Thank you for all this info. Final thoughts, final words of wisdom for the audience.
The industry is in challenging times for sure, but there's so much more opportunity to win than not win. I just think this is a good opportunity to dwell on what works, whether it's menu, whether it's people, whether it's your concept, more dwelling on what works and trimming out what is, getting in the way is working. It is a good time to look for growth. I know there's many reasons why expansion right now is questionable. Occupancy costs are incredible. There's a labor challenge and all that's true. But we're still seeing some tremendous success with independents that are developing into franchises or franchisees that are opening up new markets. So you can be careful and you can do it right.
Love it. Chris Tripoli, therestaurantclinic.com. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it was my pleasure, Lance. Thanks again for having me.
My pleasure.
If you're ready to talk about franchise opportunities, hit the link below to schedule a call. My services are free, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for listening.